alumni. Now, before he begins, we want to give him a brief introduction so that you all know a little bit about him and what he has to say today. So, Scott graduated from Grammar in 2009, and he's done a lot since then. He's the founder and CEO of Venture for Canada, VFC, a national charity that fosters the development of entrepreneurial skills and mindset in young Canadians.
So in 2021, VFC had an annual operating budget of over $12 million, 30 full-time employees, and 3,000 students and recent grads participating in its programs. VFC's donors include Employment and Social Development Canada, the RBC Foundation, TD Bank, the Hunter Family Foundation, the Future Skills Center, Fasken, and the Donald R. Sobey Foundation.
All right, and Scott is a graduate of the Halifax Grammar School and Georgetown University School of Foreign Service. After graduating from university, he worked at Goldman Sachs Incorporation in New York City. More recently, Scott was named by the Inspire Awards as the 2018 TELUS LGBTQ Innovator of the Year and was recognized on Future of Good's 2019 list of 21 young impact leaders. Now for each assembly, we want to link the theme to one of our IB learner profiles. So today, we've decided to focus on balance, which is one of the key attributes of an IB student.
So although most of us strive to be perfect all the time, sometimes we need to be reminded that we have to find a bit of balance in our lives. We can't be overdoing ourselves all the time, or we're all going to be burnt out. So it's important to find time for the things you love to create balance in your life. So say you're working really hard in your sport all the time, sometimes you need to step back and spend a few hours painting or reading or doing something that brings you peace of mind and something that you really enjoy. If you find yourself trapped in your room every night studying for 6 hours so that you can get a perfect score on a test, sometimes it can be more beneficial to take a small break and go for a walk around the block and get some fresh air. So we hope you all enjoy and learn something from what Scott has to say today. So now, without further ado, here's Scott on perfectionism.
Got a little mask, the perils of mask wearing and glasses. Yeah, so thanks so much. It's great to be back at the school. A little over 12 years since I first graduated, and I just want to acknowledge, first off, how grateful I am for I was at the school from grade 7 to grade 12, so 6 years of my life. And the experience that I had at HGS had a huge impact on my personal and professional development. I think often you don't reflect on the impact of an experience until many years after it's done, or you can better understand how it impacted your life. I think if I had never attended HGS, my life would be significantly different, significantly worse off. And there's so many things between the people I met at HGS, the opportunities they had in debating and acting in A Midsummer Night's Dream. I remember in Shakespeare, to different charitable things and some of the classes. It really is a phenomenal place. At least my time there, a very quirky institution. I'm not sure if it still is as quirky, but I loved the quirkiness of it, and I think a very sort of special place. In terms of today, I'm going to be talking about two main things. The first is what is perfectionism, and the second is how to pursue kind of healthy striving. My goal today is to sort of share personal experiences, not necessarily advice. That some things I say might relate to some people more than others, and frankly, it's up to you to determine the validity and whether certain experiences relate to you. Certainly, perfectionism is something that has had a major impact on my life, and my goal is to share experiences that I wish I had heard when I was in high school. So. What is perfectionism? Perfectionism is, in essence, a belief that you or others can attain a perfect life or perfection in some kind of way. And the thing about perfectionism is that it's actually impossible to achieve. That literally nobody is perfect. And that trying to be perfect, it's like the Sisyphus, trying to push up a big rock up a hill. It's a pointless exercise. What does perfectionism actually look like? Like, what are the symptoms of perfectionism? So there are a few different things. One is that perfectionists tend to be very sensitive to criticism or any kind of constructive feedback, because they put so much emphasis that they need to be perfect all the time that whenever they get any kind of constructive advice or criticism or feedback, they take it personally. And that can be really negative in terms of one's development, because like feedback is a gift. So if you're actually giving somebody feedback, it's not easy. It's quite hard it's uncomfortable to give feedback. And if you're resisting feedback in terms of when people give it, it's not a way that you're going to be able to grow and develop kind of as a person. A second major symptom of perfectionism is procrastination, which I think we all procrastinate at various points kind of in our life in different kinds of ways. The challenge with perfectionists and procrastination is it becomes debilitating. It becomes where even doing basic things are hard to do because it's constantly, I'll do it the next day. And the reason why perfectionists procrastinate is because they're afraid of failure, fundamentally. So they just keep on pushing things off, and they just keep on kind of procrastinating. And everybody procrastinates at some point in their life in various kind of levels. One of the important things to note is that around 20% of the population, it's actually like debilitating, and it impedes like people's ability to function. Another point in terms of what a symptom of perfectionism is it way focusing too much on the outcome rather than the journey. So in the context of like high school, it's focusing so much on, I'm going to get a 95% on this test or 90% on this test, and not on what's the outcome of the learning journey. Well, what am I gaining from this kind of like experience? When you focus too much on an outcome, it means you likely potentially have perfectionistic kind of tendencies. In terms of the kinds of perfection, there's really three different types. So the first is that there's self-oriented perfectionism, which is in essence you viewing that you need to be perfect all the time. So putting a ton of pressure on yourself. I would say, for me, I would probably be more self-oriented perfectionism. Then there's socially prescribed perfectionism, which, by the way, is the sort of, according to the people who research and study perfectionism, is the type of perfectionism that is expanding the most or has increased the most over the last 30 years. And that's in essence placing, that's society kind of, or you viewing society, you viewing that society views that you need to be perfect all of the time. So that's often precipitated by like social media, like you're seeing things on Instagram or different things that, I need to be, perfect in every kind of way. So it's socially prescribed perfectionism. The final point is other-oriented perfectionism. So that's viewing that others need to be perfect all the time and having unrealistic expectations of other people. So that's kind of what perfectionism is at a high level. In terms of my own life experiences with perfectionism, I definitely think my experience with perfectionism started at grammar school, probably in grade 9 and 10. And I'll just sort of give some personal experiences, is that I love my time at HGS, but when I think of my time at HGS, I was saying this to middle school students earlier, is my memories is literally of being tired almost all the time. Because I literally slept like 5 hours a night. I would come home and like nap for 15 minutes. I was constantly sleep deprived. I probably slept less at HGS than at almost any other point in my life to date. I would go, I remember I participated a lot in competitive debating, and I remember going to debate tournaments, like taking a red eye back from Calgary after and then sleeping 2 hours and then leaving the debate tournament and going to school the next day, and then doing homework till like 1 in the morning, and you do it again. And yeah, it was very unhealthy. I didn't look after my mind, I didn't look after my body, and in retrospect, I would highly recommend not to do that. I had this way too ridiculous expectations of what I needed to do to be kind of successful all the time. And the other thing that I think that was actually quite pernicious was a tendency to compare myself way too much with other people. So I was on the debating team, and I was on the national debating team, and I was surrounded by all these people who were really intense academic performers, and I often would compare my self-worth to how those people were performing. And I remember this starting even in middle school, but it was all the time figure, what did this person get in this test? There would be the constantly people kind of asking around on trying to figure out other people's grades. And at the end of the day, that doesn't really matter. You should measure your self-worth more based on how you're performing, not on how kind of other people are performing. And that was, I think, a mistake that I made at that point. The other thing too was becoming like extremely like obsessed with doing well on the IB exams to a point that it would hurt health. I shared an example of middle school with the middle school students, which is when I was in sometimes with actually this is for senior school exams they would sometimes use previous IB exams from other years for like grade 10, 11, and I remember me and fellow students would go and download all of these IB exams from previous years, from the last 10 years, and memorize all of the answers so that we were as well prepared as possible. And that was like numerous people were doing, and it was like totally unhealthy. Like I would not recommend doing that, and that was like a mistake. I share these experiences because these are things that I think, I wish I hadn't done, and I think I would have been a happier kind of person. The other thing, then I went to Georgetown, which is a competitive American university. In many ways, I felt actually more pressure at Georgetown than I did at Grammar. And Georgetown had 1,700 students from all around the world. There was there was so many different student activities to participate in. I signed up for way too many things, so that by my first semester of my second year, I was taking 5 classes. So that's like 15 hours a week of classes, plus all the homework you have to do. I was working 20 hours a week at an internship. I was doing around 40 hours of extracurricular activities plus a week. And I remember at one point in that semester, I was part of the Student Activities Commission where we approved, it was really bureaucratic, we approved like money for other clubs, basically. And our meetings would be from 8 p.m. to 1 in the morning, which was ridiculous in retrospect. I don't know why they would set 5-hour meetings for that time frame. And I remember basically leaving one of the meetings at around midnight because I was basically having a panic attack because I had no time to do any of this work because I had so many different activities. And I went back to my dorm room. I remember I had a shower, I laid in my bed for like an hour and just calmed down and just stopped hyperventilating. And then I had to go to the library and study and work for 4 hours till 5 in the morning. And then I slept for an hour and a half and then had to get up and kind of get going. And it was just this, I just felt miserable. And eventually I kind of scaled back some of the activities at Georgetown. But it was way too intense, put way too much pressure on myself. And then, and I would say that now, I kind of learned my lesson a little bit. And then we got into the pandemic, locked inside house all the time, working a demanding job. And I just put my pressure on myself to be like perfect, like all the like, if I'm gonna be inside locked in my house, I'm just gonna be as productive as possible during this pandemic, which was not the way to do it. So it was everything from like, I enjoyed doing yoga, but it was viewing yoga, for instance, as just like a checkbox for like productivity. Like if you view everything as just like a thing to make yourself more productive, what's like like life is for living. It's not just about being productive all of the time. So I reached a point where I just was so anxious and I could barely sleep for like a month or two. It was the worst mental health of my entire life. And then I ended up working with a therapist quite intensely for a couple of months, where I really first time realized I was like, okay, I labeled it. This is actually what it is. It's perfectionism. Then I started doing some research on perfectionism, and I was like, I see perfectionism all the time in my work at Venture for Canada, where we work with thousands of young people across the country. This is a huge issue. And I had a pre-existing relationship with the Globe and Mail, so I pitched them this article, and then it was published. But perfectionism when you look at the studies around perfectionism, it comes out very clearly. There's a study of 40,000 university students in the UK, Canada, the United States. And over the last 30 years, perfectionism has increased in its prevalence by around 30%. And there's many people who theorize why this is the case, but basically the researchers behind perfectionism argue that it's for a few reasons. One is the rise of neoliberalism, which emphasizes individual competition against one another. And in many ways, we live in like more of an individualistic, competitive society than we ever did. People are constantly looking at how many Instagram likes or how many, social media interactions that they get, right? You're comparing how you do on scores. Society kind of tells you that you're in this kind of dog-eat-dog like world where it's a meritocratic competition. And anyway, there's a lot good to read about like the issues with meritocracy. In many ways, I think sometimes the emphasis on meritocratic competition has created this society where we constantly feel like we need to, if we don't advance ourselves, we're going to fall behind. that we constantly need to be productive, that if you're not productive 24/7, you're being left behind by your peers. And you can even see this socially, like in Squid Game, if you've watched, I'm sure people have been watching Squid Game, or maybe it's a little violent, but so trigger warnings if you do watch. But you do see it, Parasite as well, like very successful movies and television shows, which are indicative of this broader social malaise of people feeling really anxious about the future and feeling the need to constantly compete. And I do think part of it relates to neoliberalism going back to the sort of 70s and 80s. The other thing that a lot of theorists relate is it also is the rise of social media. That in many ways we're constantly comparing ourselves to other people, and that this breeds an anxiety and a sort of a need to constantly be productive. And a third is that overly anxious parenting, that in many ways parents put huge amounts of pressure on their kids, especially as parents have fewer kids, for their kids to be super successful or to achieve all these kind of goals, which then creates a lot of issues for children and young people. So all of these things compounded is creating a mental health crisis for a lot of young people that is highly related to perfectionism. And perfectionism is not a badge of honor. I think a lot of people think, oh, I'm a perfectionist and that's a good thing. Perfectionism is a mental health issue. It actually is highly linked to increased rates of anxiety, depression, obsessive compulsive disorder, a wide range of mental illnesses. So don't say, oh, I'm a perfectionist, that's a good thing. Being a perfectionist it not only hurts your quality of life, it actually makes you less predisposed to have an impactful career, because it makes you a procrastinator and makes you less predisposed to take risk. So yeah, that would be my one warning, is really to not go down the perfectionist kind of path. With regards to what does healthy striving kind of look like, and this will be kind of closing, is that I think healthy striving is fundamentally like, what does it look like to not be a perfectionist? So I would say, like, in full honesty, I'm an ambitious person. I like to create impact, and my work matters. To me, a part of living a meaningful life is doing meaningful work. However, and I think this will be a balance for me for my entire life, is being ambitious in a healthy way that is not perfectionistic, that is not obsessive, and where I both have a high quality of life and I feel like I'm creating impact in a meaningful sense. So what are some personal experiences I'll share around kind of healthy striving? So first off is that one of the things I think that's really important from my own sort of life experience to share is focus way more on the journey rather than the outcome. So I think when I think of my own experience at grammar and at other places, is I would become really focused on getting certain kinds of grades. So I'd say, I want to get an 85% on this test. I want to get a 90% on this test. I want to get this IB score. I read a great book earlier this year called Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke, who's one of the most successful poker players of all time. And one of the things she said in the book that really resonated with me is that when you ask somebody what was their best decision in their life, they'll often point to what is the best outcome. The reality is that our decisions don't necessarily always correlate with outcomes. Sometimes you can make a really good decision, like in poker, but the outcome is really bad just because you get bad luck. Likewise, sometimes you can make actually a really bad decision, but by fluke, the outcome is good. Point being is our choices matter, like poker, but life also has a lot of luck. For instance, you could be studying for a test and you could get anywhere between, let's say, 80 to 90, just based on luck. Certain questions, how the mood is the person grading that test that day, like there's a lot of luck. And life, frankly, there's a lot of luck. Like, I think a lot of people, you're often born in Canada, right? Like you're lucky in terms of who your parents are. You're all through, whether getting illnesses or meeting some random person who ends up being incredibly kind of helpful for you. So when you over-focus on outcomes, you set yourself up for disappointment, because you can't control the outcome. You can influence the outcome, but you do not control the outcome. So if you focus, now what do you do control? You do control the journey. You control the extent to which you will, and so one of the things I would, kind of advice I would share from my own personal experience that I wish I did, and I'm trying to do more now, is rather than say, oh, I want to get this score on a test, focus on more of a learning goal. right? I want to really know this content well. I want to learn something new, right? Like for instance, for my work, I work in Venture Canada works across the country, so I work in French, and I'm not necessarily someone who loves learning languages, but for my job, it is important that I eventually be fluently bilingual. So, one of the things I said is, you know what, my learning goal is I'd love to appreciate French culture and French language, and really to speak French and to enjoy the experience of learning it. So that'd be my first kind of comment, is focus more on the journey rather than the outcome. A second point, I think that, and I think a lot of high achieving or people who are very ambitious strive this, is to ask the question of like, why are you so ambitious? Like, what is motivating it, right? And I think a challenge that a lot of people have is the reason why they're so ambitious, the reason why they're so motivated, is sometimes linked to a sense of feeling that they're broken. Feeling that they need to achieve that success to make themselves feel good about themselves. Because otherwise they feel this deep sense of like brokenness of who they are. And I'll share this from my own experience, is that I'm gay and was closeted until I was in university. And there's lots of research on this. There's a famous New York Times piece from like 8 years ago called "The Best Little Boy of the World." But it talks about, in particular, how a lot of LGBT people who are closeted in their lives, the way that they get a sense of sort of self-worth is through professional achievement. And you can see, for instance, at Yale, there's a study where it's like 30% of people at Yale are self-identify as LGBT. Like, there's disproportionate levels of professional attainment, because that's a way that in a society that marginalizes you, the way you feel good about yourself is professional achievement. By the way, I think that I share this as a gay person, but I think that this can also apply to people from other marginalized communities as well. So I share this in the sense that achieve professional success because it's something that you want to make an impact, right? Or it's something you enjoy. Not as and really ask yourself, are you doing this to make yourself, to fix the sense of brokenness? Because it doesn't matter how much professional success you get, that's never going to fix that. There's other things you need to do. So from my own experience, it is really important to ask yourself, well, why? Why are you working so hard? And I see so many people that are so obsessed with working so hard, with achieving professional success, that they never really ask themselves that deep question of what's the whole point of why they're working 80 hours a week. And that's one thing I would highly kind of recommend. Another thing I would recommend is that failure is an integral part of life. Everybody makes mistakes. And I'll share this example this morning, I'll share it now. Is that there's a Venture for Canada fellow alumni he's the co-founder of a company that's worth over $2 billion. They recently raised $215 million from SoftBank. They are one of the most successful technology companies in Canadian history. I've seen this company since they were 3 people working out of a house 5 years ago to a multi-billion-dollar company. This company has pivoted their business model like half a dozen times. They have gone through so much chaos. They have had co-founders leave. They have had so much drama. And the point being is that often we just see these successful stories of careers and lives and different things. But at the end of the day, when you look at sort of most people, and including a lot of people who have meaningful and happy lives, is they go through tons of failure. That life is in many ways constantly a lifelong learning journey. And if you're learning, you're always failing. That one of the things I would say to myself is try to do something that scares yourself every day to some extent. And that means failing sometimes. And that it is okay to fail. That's actually a good thing to do. And that if you're always succeeding, frankly, it means you're probably not, you're not trying new things. You're not sort of seeing some of the different wonders of life. And kind of in closing, one of the things I would want to emphasize, and I really want to kind of put this out there, is that there's one other thing I would say is, do not compare yourselves with others. Get your sense of self-worth from your own professional, and kind of a sense of your own happiness and intrinsic kind of self-value. That when I was at Grammar, one of the mistakes I made was, as I mentioned earlier, way too much comparing myself with other people. I think I was on the competitive debating team, and of anyone on the debating team, I was probably the lowest academic performer on the team. And I often would be like, okay, so I'm just going to work myself to the bone to try to achieve the same grades as these other people. And it caused me to have all these unhealthy habits, but also a sense of like really measuring my self-worth by other people. And I think social media is horrible at that. You know, Mark Benioff, the founder of Salesforce, you know, he has a great quote where he says that Facebook and Instagram today will be viewed like what cigarettes were viewed like 30 years ago. And I genuinely believe that like social media, I think is such a negative consequence in many ways in terms of the way it's been used currently. So I would really recommend, like, when you succeed or when you achieve a goal or you do something of meaning, base it based on your own intrinsic sense of self-worth, not in terms of how other people are doing. And that's something that's it's hardwired in our DNA as humans to compare ourselves with other people. But it's really important to try to fight that instinct and measure yourself based on your own, you know, goal setting or sense of happiness rather than how other people are doing. In closing, I really want to emphasize this point is that you are not the sum of your accomplishments. You are not the sum of your accomplishments, and you are enough just the way you are. Thank you.
Or teachers have any questions for Scott? And we'll just open the floor for a couple minutes.
I
guess as a new teacher at grammar, I ask where the students, if they are feeling like they're identifying a lot with what you're saying about feeling or feeling that they might be perfectionists, where would they go for help? How do you change your way of working?
So, I mean, I think each person, it's a great question. I think each person has their own, you know, journey through this. I would say, you know, talking to friends and family members is a good initial step, but I think one of the things that's actually really important is to normalize like therapy and going to seek like mental health support. You know, one of the things with Venture for Canada, I've talked to many very prominent and successful entrepreneurs. And one of the things you realize is that like, everybody goes through challenges in life, and I wish we need to normalize seeking mental health support and normalize going to seek therapy and other things. Something like 50% of all people who face significant mental distress never go seek professional help. Like, that's a crisis. If you had that with physical illnesses, people would be talking about that way more. Mental health is health. And so to answer your question is what I would say is, you know, if it's impeding your ability to function in a normal way or your kind of quality of life, then you should absolutely seek professional help. And I didn't see a therapist for the first time until I was in my late 20s. I wish I had gone to see a therapist much kind of earlier in my life. Unfortunately, I think that there's still a huge amount of stigma. I think one positive of the pandemic is that there's a lot more awareness around mental health today. Certainly way more than there was 12, 13, 14 years ago. But I still think that there's a lot of work that needs to be done to normalize seeking mental health support. So I appreciate you answering or asking that question, because I think it's a really important point to mention. And to give background, you know, after I spoke to middle school students, I had 2 people come up to me like crying, saying, "What should I do? I'm feeling this horrible," and I was shocked. I was like, these are like, you know, 14-year-olds that are like, you know, they don't know what to do. They don't know who to talk to. They don't feel like they can talk to their parents about this. And I was, you know, so I said to them, I don't know your specific situation, but I really recommend go seek professional help, because you know, listen, month of March, April, I saw a therapist for like 3 times a week for a period of time. Now, you know, I feel much better. Don't feel like I need it, and neither does the therapist. But what I would say is that you know, I'm sure there's people here who maybe are struggling with things, and if you are, just statistically, and if you are struggling with something, like, don't feel ashamed. You know, and it does get better, and seeking professional help is an important part, I think, of feeling better in most cases.
I have a question. So, like, understand that being like too much of a perfectionist is a bad thing, but do you believe like being competitive could still be a good thing as long as you capture a reasonable amount?
Yeah, and listen, I would say I'm a competitive person. I'm ambitious, right? Like, I think sometimes when my colleagues will sometimes be like, oh my, like Scott, like you keep on proposing all this new random, thing. Like you keep on pushing us to do more and more. And sometimes, I think they think I can be a little like too ambitious. But what I would say is that it's that healthy ambition, right? So it's like the difference between healthy striving and perfection. So being, the antithesis, the way to deal with perfectionism is not being kind of like a slug and just laying on the couch all day and eating Doritos. That is not what I am recommending, right? What I am recommending is, and it's like each person has to different. If you are driven to create impact, like for me, a big part of my happiness is I like to create positive social impact. That's part of my self-actualization. For background self-actualization, Maslow hierarchy of the needs, what you can be, you must be. But but to the point is it's focusing more on the journey rather than the outcome. It's recognizing failure as a part of life, and it's not putting too much emphasis on professional success. Like it's like you are not the sum of your professional success. It's a part of your life, but it shouldn't be your entire life. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
So you said a moment ago about how there are many people you met who don't really know the purpose of trying to be perfect or trying to get the best out of their life. What do you think is the purpose of basically trying your best in life, or what is your opinion of that?
Yeah, it's a great question, a very a complicated one. I'm definitely not a philosopher, but I would say I have thought a lot about this. So Maslow has the whole I would take a step back. One of the things I would recommend that I personally find helpful, and I have people at Venture for Canada do this, is craft a personal mission statement, which can be really broad. So for me, it's to help others achieve their full potential. That is my personal mission statement in life, currently. And that's the core of what I do at my work at Venture for Canada. And part of even today, it's try to help other people achieve their full potential. What I would encourage is to kind of ask yourself, like, what are the things that motivate you the most? And I think every person, and frankly, personal mission statements kind of change over time. So this is somewhat of a vague answer, but I would say it varies for each person, right? Like Maslow's definition of self-actualization is what you can be, what you must be. And the unique thing, and a common misconception about self-actualization, is that there's one kind of self-actualization. The reality is each person in this room has a different kind of self-actualization, right? Like their self-actualized version of themselves is different. So to me, it is to try to be the best kind of person you can be. And by the way, that is not necessarily having the most professional success, right? What I see the best is not to be, but it's it's to try to be the kindest, right? The most balanced, the happiest, right? To me, that's kind of what the goal kind of should be. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Right. Okay, well, thanks for coming in, answering our questions. I'm sure a lot of us can relate to what you're saying. We do have a gift of appreciation, so on behalf of all of us, thank you.
Thank you.